Look, I need to be straight with you about what's happening in Cleveland right now because this situation has gone from bad to absolutely catastrophic. We're watching a franchise implode in real time, and the wildest part is that everyone saw it coming except the people actually making decisions inside that building. The Browns aren't just losing games anymore, they're losing credibility, they're losing their fan base, and they're losing any sense of direction for what this team is supposed to be. And at the center of all this chaos is a quarterback situation so mishandled that it should be used as a case study in business schools about what not to do when you have valuable assets. Let me paint the picture of where we're actually at right now. You've got Dillon Gabriel out there every Sunday looking like he's never seen an NFL defense before. The reads are slow, the throws are dangerous, and his receivers are legitimately scared to go across the middle because they know what's coming. It's not just that he's bad, it's that he's bad in ways that don't seem fixable with more reps or better coaching. These are fundamental issues with processing speed and decision making that usually don't improve dramatically once you hit the NFL level. Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders is sitting on the bench watching all this happen, barely getting any meaningful practice time, treated like some kind of emergency option that they're desperately hoping they never have to use. The disconnect between what we're seeing and what the coaching staff keeps saying is absolutely wild. Kevin Stefanski stands up at press conferences talking about how they believe in their guys, how they're sticking with the process, how Dillon just needs more time to develop chemistry with his receivers. But what process are we talking about exactly? The process of running the same plays that don't work. The process of putting your young quarterback in positions where he's guaranteed to fail. The process of ignoring the obvious solution that's sitting right there on your bench. None of it makes any sense unless you understand that organizations sometimes get so locked into their own narratives that they can't see reality anymore. Here's what really gets under my skin about this whole thing. The Browns had options coming into this season, real options. They could have kept Joe Flacco, who actually showed he could win games with this roster. They could have held on to Jameis Winston, who at least brought energy and wasn't afraid to push the ball downfield. Instead, they shipped both of those guys out, convinced themselves that their rookie quarterbacks were ready to carry the load, and then proceeded to not actually prepare either of those rookies for the job. It's organizational malpractice on a level that's hard to comprehend. And the timing of all this couldn't be worse. Your defense is playing at an elite level right now. Myles Garrett is doing superhuman things every single week. Your secondary is creating turnovers. Your linebackers are flying around making plays all over the field. This is the kind of defense that can mask offensive deficiencies and steal you wins even when things aren't clicking on that side of the ball. But there's a limit to how much any defense can carry a team, and the Browns are testing that limit every single week. You can only ask your defense to hold teams to 17 points so many times before it stops working because your offense can't score 14. The schedule situation is what makes this even more frustrating. Looking ahead, you've got games against the Jets, Raiders, and Titans. These are not powerhouse teams. These are flawed, struggling organizations that are very much beatable, even with a rookie quarterback making his first starts. The Jets just lost Sauce Gardner, and their defense isn't nearly as scary without him. The Raiders are actively tanking at this point, having shipped out their best players for draft picks. The Titans are a complete mess from top to bottom. These are the exact games where you should be seeing what you have in Shedeur Sanders because the margin for error is bigger, and the consequences of losing are minimal since your season is already cooked anyway. But instead of being proactive, instead of making the change now when it could actually provide useful information for the future, the Browns are going to wait. They're going to give Dillon Gabriel another week, then another week after that. They'll watch him throw more interceptions, put more receivers in the hospital, and continue to show that he's not the answer. And by the time they finally make the switch to Shedeur, it'll be week 14 or 15, the season will be completely lost, and they'll only get a handful of games to evaluate him. It's the worst possible way to handle the situation. Let's talk about what proper quarterback development actually looks like, because the Browns clearly don't understand it. When you draft multiple quarterbacks, you create legitimate competition from day one, not fake competition where everyone knows who's really going to start. Real competition where both guys are getting first team reps, both guys are being featured in the preseason, both guys understand that the job is truly up for grabs. You script situations in practice that challenge both players and reveal their strengths and weaknesses. You design plays that play to each quarterback's specific skill set so you can see what they do well. You create an environment where the best player wins regardless of where they were drafted or what the depth chart said in April. The Browns did none of that. They handed Dillon Gabriel the starting job before training camp even started based on nothing more than draft position. They gave Shedeur token reps with the second and third team, barely let him throw with the starters, and acted like he should be grateful just to be in the building. And when Gabriel started showing problems in OTAs and training camp, problems that were obvious to anyone paying attention, they didn't adjust. They didn't create more competition. They didn't give Shedeur a real chance to challenge for the job. They just kept rolling with their predetermined plan and hoped it would somehow work out. Now here's where it gets really interesting from a roster construction standpoint. Shedeur Sanders was a 5th round pick. 5th round. That's incredible value for a quarterback who was getting 1st round buzz before the draft process began. The only reason he fell that far was concerns about his father's involvement and questions about whether he could succeed outside of Colorado's system. But from a pure talent perspective, from an arm strength and accuracy and leadership perspective, this is a guy who should have gone much higher. The Browns basically got a lottery ticket for the price of a scratch-off, and instead of scratching it to see if they won, they're keeping it in a drawer hoping they never have to cash it in. Compare that to Dillon Gabriel, who cost them a 3rd round pick. 3rd round picks are valuable assets. Those are guys who are supposed to come in and contribute right away, either as starters or as key rotational players. And what have they gotten from that investment? A quarterback who looks overmatched, who's putting his teammates in danger, and who isn't showing the kind of improvement you need to see from young players. At some point, you have to cut your losses. At some point, you have to admit that you made a mistake in the evaluation process and move on. But NFL teams hate doing that because it means admitting they were wrong, and admitting you were wrong means taking responsibility for bad decisions. The financial aspect of this situation is another layer that makes it even more frustrating. Both of these quarterbacks are on rookie deals, which means they're incredibly cheap by NFL standards. You're paying them essentially nothing compared to what you'd pay a veteran starter. That's supposed to be a massive advantage because it allows you to invest in other positions, build a complete roster, and compete while your quarterback is still developing. But you only get that advantage if your quarterback is actually playing and developing. If he's sitting on the bench learning nothing and getting no experience, you're wasting both the asset and the financial flexibility it provides. Let me ask you something that the Browns clearly haven't asked themselves. What's the worst case scenario if you start Shedeur Sanders right now? Seriously, think about it. He comes in, he struggles, he throws some interceptions, he looks like a rookie quarterback who wasn't properly developed. Okay, so what? You're already 2-6. You're already out of playoff contention. You're already in position to draft high next year. Playing Shedeur and having him struggle doesn't change any of that, but it does give you information. It tells you whether he's worth continuing to develop or whether you need to draft another quarterback. It tells you what his strengths and weaknesses are so you can build around them. It tells you if there's anything they're worth salvaging or if you need to completely start over at the position. Now compare that to the worst case scenario if you keep starting Dillon Gabriel. He continues to struggle, which seems likely based on what we've seen. You waste another month of the season learning nothing new because you already know Gabriel isn't the answer. You damage his confidence even more by leaving him out there to fail repeatedly. You create resentment in the locker room as defensive players watch their efforts get wasted by an offense that can't function. And most importantly, you get to the end of the season without knowing anything about Shedeur Sanders, which means you're going into the offseason with the same questions you have right now. That's the actual worst case scenario, and it's exactly what's going to happen if they don't make a change soon. The locker room dynamics are something that doesn't get talked about enough in all of this. You've got veterans on that defense who are in their prime years, who are sacrificing their bodies every week, who are doing everything possible to give their team a chance to win, and they're watching the offense completely waste those opportunities. How long before Myles Garrett starts getting frustrated? How long before the defensive backs who are making incredible plays to create turnovers start wondering why it doesn't matter? Because the offense just gives the ball right back. These are real chemistry chemistry issues that can poison a team if they're not addressed. And it's not just the defense either. Think about the offensive players, especially the wide receivers. Cedric Tillman is a talented young player who should be developing and growing in this offense. Instead, he's catching passes from a quarterback who's constantly putting him in dangerous situations. Elijah Moore, Amari Cooper before he was traded, these guys are professionals who want to win and produce, but they can't do their jobs effectively when the quarterback play is this poor. At some point, offensive players start questioning the coaching staff's decisions too. They start wondering why changes aren't being made when it's obvious to everyone that something needs to change. The media coverage of this situation has been fascinating to watch evolve. Early in the season, you had a lot of people willing to give Gabriel the benefit of the doubt. He's a rookie, he needs time, the offense around him isn't great, all the usual excuses. But as the weeks have gone on, even the most optimistic analysts are running out of ways to defend what they're seeing. The tape doesn't lie. The interceptions keep coming, the decision making isn't improving, and now you're starting to see more and more people openly questioning why Shedeur isn't playing, which means the narrative is shifting from be patient with Gabriel to what are the Browns doing? Social media has been absolutely brutal, and honestly, it's warranted. Dillon Gabriel is getting roasted every single week, and the jokes are creative, they're harsh, and they're mostly accurate. That's what happens when you're a high-profile player in a high-profile market playing poorly on national television. The court of public opinion has already rendered its verdict, and that verdict is that Gabriel isn't it. Now, public opinion isn't always right, and sometimes fans are too quick to give up on young players. But in this case, the eye test supports what everyone is saying. This isn't a situation where the stats look bad, but the actual play is encouraging. Both the stats and the tape are telling the same story. Here's something else that's been bugging me about this whole situation: the lack of creativity in the offensive play calling. Even if you're committed to Dillon Gabriel as your starter, even if you truly believe he's your best option right now, shouldn't you be designing an offense that maximizes his strengths and minimizes his weaknesses? Shouldn't you be calling plays that give him easy completions to build confidence? Shouldn't you be using play action and misdirection to create easier throwing windows? Instead, it looks like they're running a generic offense with no adjustments for who their quarterback actually is. That's coaching malpractice. That's Kevin Stefanski being too stubborn or too uncreative to adapt to his personnel. The draft implications of all this are huge and don't seem to be factoring into the Browns' decision-making at all. Every game you win from this point forward pushes you down the draft board. And yes, I understand that you can't tank, you can't tell players to lose on purpose, and you can't disrespect the game by not trying. But you can make decisions that position your organization for future success. Starting Shedeur Sanders isn't tanking, it's evaluation. It's trying to figure out what you have so you can make informed decisions in the offseason. If he plays well and you win some games, great. If he struggles and you lose, well, at least you're getting a better draft pick while gathering useful information. The comparison to other teams handling similar situations is stark. Look at what the Patriots did with Drake May. They sat him for a few weeks while Bailey Zappe started and struggled, and then they made the switch because it was obvious they needed to see what they had in their rookie. Now May is getting invaluable experience, showing flashes of the talent that made him a top pick, and the Patriots are gathering information about whether he's their long-term answer. That's how you handle a quarterback situation when your season is lost. You prioritize development and evaluation over trying to squeeze out meaningless wins. Or look at what Washington did with Jaden Daniels. They threw him right into the fire from day one, built an offense around his specific skill set, and let him learn on the job. Has he made mistakes? Of course. He's a rookie, but he's also shown that he belongs, that he can make plays at this level, and that Washington might have found their franchise quarterback. That's what the Browns should have done with Shedeur if they really believed in him. Give him the job, give him the support, and let him prove himself one way or the other. Instead, the Browns are doing this weird hybrid approach where they're not fully committed to Gabriel, but they're also not willing to move on from him. It's the worst of both worlds. Gabriel isn't getting the full support and scheming he would need to succeed, but Shedeur also isn't getting the opportunity to prove what he can do. Everybody loses in this scenario except for the other teams in the AFC North, who are thrilled to watch the Browns continue to be dysfunctional. The Stefanski situation is worth examining more closely because he's the one ultimately responsible for all of this. I get that he has coaching accolades, I understand that he's won awards and has a reputation as an offensive mind, but what has he actually accomplished with this franchise? He had one good season with Baker Mayfield in 2020, and even that ended with a playoff loss. Since then, it's been excuse after excuse. The quarterback play isn't good enough, the offensive line isn't good enough, the receivers aren't good enough. At what point do we start questioning whether the common denominator is the coaching? At what point do we acknowledge that maybe Stefanski isn't the genius everyone thought he was? His handling of the quarterback situation specifically has been borderline incompetent. The decision to move on from both Flacco and Winston at the same time. The failure to properly develop Gabriel in the preseason. The refusal to even consider giving Shedeur meaningful opportunities. The conservative scared play calling that doesn't put anyone in position to succeed. These are all coaching decisions, and they've all been wrong. If the Browns have any self-awareness at all, Stefanski should be on the hot seat. There should be real questions about whether he's the right person to lead this franchise forward. But here's the thing about the Browns. They don't operate like normal franchises. They make decisions based on politics and PR instead of what's actually best for the team. They care more about saving face than about fixing problems. They'll ride a bad situation into the ground rather than admitting they made a mistake and changing course. That's why they're in this mess. That's why they've been in various versions of this mess for the better part of 2 decades. Until the fundamental approach changes, until they start prioritizing competence over ego, nothing is going to get better. So what happens next? My best guess is that the Browns keep trotting Gabriel out there for at least a few more weeks. They'll beat 1 or 2 of the bad teams on their schedule and convince themselves that he's improving. They'll point to completion percentage or yards per game or some other stat that doesn't tell the full story. And then sometime in December, when the season is completely dead and buried, they'll finally give Shedeur a start or 2. It'll be too little too late to actually learn anything useful, but they'll check the box and say they gave him a chance. Then they'll go into the offseason with no real answers at quarterback. They'll probably draft another quarterback high because they won't have confidence in either Gabriel or Shedeur. They'll create another competition that isn't really a competition, and the cycle will continue. That's the Browns way. That's what they do. They find new and creative ways to disappoint their fans while convincing themselves that they're building something sustainable. It would be impressive if it wasn't so sad. The fan base deserves so much better than this. Browns fans are some of the most loyal, passionate, long-suffering supporters in all of sports. They show up year after year despite having almost nothing to cheer for. They invest their time, money, and emotional energy into a team that keeps letting them down. And now they're being asked to watch another lost season where the team won't even try the interesting option at quarterback. It's insulting, honestly. These fans deserve to at least see what Shedeur can do. They deserve some hope, some excitement, some reason to tune in on Sundays besides watching the defense make plays. This whole situation is just another chapter in the sad, frustrating, infuriating history of the Cleveland Browns. A team with resources, with talent, with everything they need to compete, but without the organizational competence to put it all together. They're wasting elite defensive years. They're wasting draft capital. They're wasting everyone's time. And the worst part is that it's all so avoidable. All they have to do is make the obvious decision that everyone outside the building can see clearly. Start Shedeur Sanders. See what you have. Make an informed decision about the future. But they won't do it because that's not how the Browns operate. So we'll keep watching this train wreck, keep shaking our heads, and keep wondering how much longer this franchise can stay stuck in the same patterns before something finally breaks and forces real change.